Black Ops 6 Zombies. What a year. And yes, it's been a year. Black Ops 6 came out on October 25th, 2024, and now we're past that in 2025, which is honestly insane. And what makes it even crazier is that in a couple weeks time, we're going to be playing Black Ops 7, another Treyarch game back-to-back years, which is crazy because it's stuff that we used to dream about and now it's actually happening, but not everyone's super excited for it. But obviously this isn't a video about Black Ops 7. Instead, I want to look over this last year of zombies, collect my thoughts on everything that they gave us, from all of its peaks to all of its valleys and everything in between, and weigh those against each other, and finally give you guys my final review of Black Ops 6 Zombies. Now, one thing I will say right at the start of this video, if you're expecting someone to blatantly hate on modern zombies or Black Ops 6 specifically, this isn't the video for you. Sure, I have some major issues with modern zombies, but I kind of think a lot of the things that people talk about aren't as bad as people say, but they're still an issue, at least in most cases. There's obviously some exceptions. So in other words, if you guys just came to hate on Black Ops 6, that's not what this video is. I will point out its problems and all the issues I've had with it, but I will also be pointing out everything that I think Black Ops 6 did great. And spoiler, I do think there are things that Black Ops 6 did great. Now, I did put a ton of time, effort, and work into everything in this video, and as always, I'd appreciate if you guys could show any support you guys possibly can on this video. But with that said, let's talk about my final review of Black Ops 6 Zombies.
You're done.
Now, much like any video game out there, the most important part of a game is its gameplay. And it's no different with Black Ops 6 Zombies. And Black Ops 6 Zombies is part of this quote-unquote modern zombies, where it started in Cold War, and because of that, a lot of those systems do transfer over to this game, and some of those good, some of those bad, and some of those kind of but they also do adjust a couple of them, and I want to go over all of these things, some things you may be familiar with, and some things you may need to learn a little bit more about. And the first thing I want to talk about is the point system, and the point system in this game is pretty simple. It's based on kills, not damage. So if you kill a zombie with a body shot, it's 90 points. If you kill it with a melee kill, it's 105, and if you get a headshot, it's 115. And Treyarch likes this for 3 reasons. One is that because it is simple and everyone can easily understand it, but 2, they can also control at what point in the game are you going to be doing things, at what point in the game are you opening the map, getting triple pack punch and stuff like that. And finally, it's because they want every gun to be on an even playing field when it comes to getting points, so you don't feel unincentivized to not use shotguns and wonder weapons like you may have in the past. But the problem is that that was all a part of the charm. We knew these guns were better than the other guns, but we didn't use them because we knew we were trying to get points, and we'll use them later. And also, why does Treyarch care at what point do we open the map or get triple pack punch? Every game should be different based on how we played it and what we spent our points on. Like, why are you trying to control at what point are we doing these things? Like, nothing about this makes sense. This is the one that's always frustrated me because I don't understand the positive of this. Even things I don't like about modern zombies, I at least understand why they're in the game, but this one I just don't understand this change, and I'll never like it about modern zombies, and I really wish they would go back to the OG point system. But another really controversial thing is the loadouts. Now, they did change the loadout slightly, where now you could choose a tactical and lethal spawn in with, and also a dedicated melee weapon, and finally the gobblegum pack. We'll get to gobblegums later. Now, for the 2 other changes, they don't really matter too much to me, they're whatever. But the main problem with the loadouts will always be the fact that you spawn with any regular gun you want, SMG, AR, LMG, it doesn't matter. And this has a couple big problems. But it's not like I don't understand the benefits of this. Obviously, a big benefit is that the camo grind is actually fun to do using loadouts. Like, doing the camo grind without loadouts, we saw that in Black Ops 4, and nobody did it because how terrible it was. And on top of that, in Black Ops 6, another cool thing is that you were able to make metas. Like, there's metas, like the best gun to use in this boss fight, which is something you really wouldn't be able to do without a loadout system. But are those worth the trade-offs? Because a big problem with the loadout system is that early game progression is completely gone. Every single modern zombies map plays the exact same way for me. I turn on the rampage inducer, stay in spawn till round 7, then open the map. That's every single map. And what's even worse is that it makes one of the most iconic things in Call of Duty Zombies useless with the mystery box. Like, how often are you hitting the mystery box because of the loadout? Like, barely any. And finally, because the loadout system exists, weapon rarity exists, and a lot of people don't like that either. So is that really worth all of those trade-offs? I mean, personally, I just don't think so. But this does bring me to another system, and this is the salvage system in this game. And the salvage system was changed a little bit from Cold War to this game, and what they did is actually remove blue salvage and it's just all green salvage, which is a nice quality of life change. But on top of that, another quality of life change was actually in co-op play, because now there's personal salvage where your teammate can't come steal it, which I had a big problem with in Cold War because my homie would always do that, so I'm really happy with that change. But salvage in this game is used for the crafting table, and the crafting table is identical to how it was in Cold War for the most part. And then the other thing it's used for is the armory, and the armory will still do your weapon rarity, but instead of doing armor, they took the armor out of the armory and now put your ammo mods, which I do think is a good change because I didn't think they belonged in the pack lunch in the form they did, so I'm glad with that. But the question is, was it a good thing for how they did the armor? Because now the armor is a wall buy and you need to buy it twice. The first time is going to be for 4,000, second time is going to be for 10,000, so it's going to be 14,000 in total to buy your max armor. And in a game that perks are really expensive, and also you're going to spend 50,000 to triple pack a bunch of gun, do we really need to be spending more points? Personally, I don't think so, so I don't really like this change all too much. I mean, I don't know if it belongs in salvage either, but like, oh my gosh, it is just way too much to spend on. And on top of that, they made some changes by default to the armor, because now you're spawning in with one armor plate. With Cold War, you didn't spawn in with any, so it makes it even easier in the early rounds. But then on top of that, instead of just automatically plating when you have an extra plate on the floor, now you have to manually plate. And the one benefit of this is that you could have a reserve of plates and plate whenever you want, but at the same time, the biggest problem of this is that this feels very much like Warzone. This is a copy of 1-to-1 to Warzone, and I don't like the Warzone-ification conversation about modern zombies, but this is one time when they're right. This doesn't feel like zombies, it feels like Warzone, and I just don't like it. So overall, I'm not a big fan of the changes they made to armor, even though I'm not a fan of armor to begin with. But the question is, why is armor even in the game? Well, to me, I think the reason why is because damage scaling is in the game. If you guys don't know what that is, it's where on early rounds zombies do less damage, and later rounds they do a lot more damage. And you need armor, especially for those higher rounds, because the zombies will be doing so much damage later then, and you have to have a way to combat that, and the answer there is armor. But then again, this does make it way easier because zombies do way less damage in early rounds, and then on top of that you have armor. So I don't know, it's a weird system and I really don't like it. Damage scaling is the all-time worst addition to Call of Duty Zombies of all time, in my opinion. But those are just kind of the negative things for the most part, but there are some good things about modern zombies that continue. We still see the rampage inducer, we still see the exfil, that's a really cool, but we also see features like mantling still in the game, which I really like because it lets you move around the map more fluidly, and on top of that you get out of sticky situations easy. But then even things like the removal of the perk limit I love so much, and I'm glad that continues into this game. But then probably the best thing about modern zombies is that the DLC maps are free. You just buy the game for $70 and you don't buy anything else after that. There's no buying a $60 game and then $50 season pass. It's completely gone. And I know that started in Cold War. I'm so glad I continue into Black Ops 6. And I know people argue against that, but I disagree so strongly. I do not want to be spending more money on these maps, and I'm glad to see that change. But of course, those are just the things that already existed in modern zombies and continue to be the same or slightly changed. But there are some new features, and oh my gosh, did Black Ops 6 nail the new features? Starting off with the augments. Now the augments is kind of a recreation of the crystal system from Cold War, except it is not as OP because you can't use all of them at once and you're more limited with them. Now for how it works, with every perk, ammo mod, and field upgrade, you'll be able to research all of them, and when you do, you'll unlock 6 augments, 3 majors and 3 minors. And when you do that, you could choose 1 major and 1 minor to put on all of these different items. And this is so cool because it adds a whole new layer of not only grind to the game, but also layer of depth and strategy. Like, how many strategy guides have you seen out there for high rounds, Easter eggs, or anything in the game, even getting your headshots for your guns? Like, there's so many strategies that all involve augments, and that's so freaking cool, and I love that so much. One of the best additions to Call of Duty Zombies ever. But then Treyarch didn't stop hitting, because on top of that, they added in directed mode, a mode that would practically hold your hand, tell you how to do the Easter egg steps on screen, and also lock the round at round 15 so the rounds couldn't get out of hand, and even made the boss fights a bit easier. And that is so cool, because as much as I love Easter eggs, most people don't do Easter eggs. I think the average percentage of amount of players that complete Easter eggs was around 2%. But with directed mode, Treyarch said that was bumped up all the way to almost 15%. That is absolutely huge, and to me, I think this is a great addition to the game, and the more people that can do Easter eggs, the better in my mind. But it still doesn't stop with the hits, because on top of that, Treyarch added in save game. And this means in your solo games, you could just pause the game, quit and save, and then come back to that exact same spot in a later date, which is so cool, because how many times have we all been in that situation where we're in the middle of a game and all of a sudden something comes up and we have to just end the game? Well, not anymore. We just come back to that saved place. But you could even use it in more creative ways, because one thing that I noticed is that every game is going to have some glitches, and what normally happens, your Easter egg glitches out, you got to restart your game. Not with save, because now you save your game, reload it, and most of the time that glitch is fixed, which is so nice. Like, I love that so much. But it's not only just you saving your game, because as long as you're playing the game, it will always be saving your game at the end of every single round. So if your game ever crashes, you lose internet connection, or your game just disconnects because of one reason or another, you'll be able to load that game back up, and most of the time it will ask if you want to resume that game that crashed, and that is so freaking cool. It has saved so many of my games over this last year, and I love it so freaking much. It's just so good. So Treyarch, shout out to you for all of these amazing additions to the game. Now, one thing that was not great with all these additions is that they added a pause timer, and you could only be paused for 15 minutes. And to be honest, most of the time you're not going to be paused for more than 15 minutes anyways, but it is annoying sometimes when you do run into that situation, and I don't like it. But I don't think this Treyarch is something they're doing because they want to, obviously. Instead, it's because of technical limitations, because this is an always online game, always connected to the server type of game. So that's just how it is, unfortunately, with how they're building their games, and they can't be spending too much data service on a pause game, and that's why that exists. So, I mean, I wish the games wouldn't always be online, but unfortunately, that's what Call of Duty does nowadays. But the final kind of new gameplay, but it's more of a returning thing, is actually Gobblegums. And Gobblegums in this game, I think, are done the best compared to any other game and any other thing like them. Even Gobblegums from Black Ops 3, because Gobblegums in Black Ops 3 were a bit OP, like especially Perkaholic and Shopping Free and stuff like that, like they were really OP. But even though those same Gobblegums return in this game, because of how Modern Zombies works, it's not as big of a deal because you don't have a perk limit anyways. So none of these Gobblegums feel like you need to have them or you're going to be held back compared to the people who do. And that's a great thing to the game, because they're not necessary. They don't feel like you're being left behind not using them. But when you do use them, it is fun. And honestly, the only ever time I use Gobblegums in this game is if a map just came out and I failed my initial run and I just want to get back to where I was as fast as possible. Then I would use Gobblegums. But for the most part, I didn't feel like I needed to use them. And that's a great feeling, because that's not how I felt during Black Ops 3. And on top of that, I like how you earn them, even though the earn rate for Ultras is not as high as I would like, but I still like that you earn a decent portion of them. But also, if you do want to buy them, which I wouldn't recommend, but if you do, at least now you could choose which Gobblegums you're buying. Sure, they're overpriced, but at least you know what you're getting. Unlike in Black Ops 3, where they just had gambling in it, like, it is such a better system, and I like it a lot more. So overall, I like how they implemented Gobblegums. Slight changes here and there, but overall, I like it. But now I want to talk about some overall branching ideas of gameplay. And the first thing I want to talk about are Easter eggs in general. We'll get into individual maps later, but the Easter eggs in general are done so freaking well. Sure, Liberty Falls and the Tomb are not great, but the rest, they're so fun. And I'm pretty sure I remember Treyarch saying this at one point or another, that with Black Ops 6, they were trying to make all the Easter eggs similar to the Rocket. And what that means is that they're not too complicated, but they're not too easy. They don't take too long, but they're not too short, which is a big change compared to their last two games, because with Black Ops 4, all the Easter eggs were way too convoluted and took way too long to complete. Then Cold War comes around, they have the opposite problem. They're too simple and they're too fast to beat. That was the other problems, but now we strike a nice middle ground where they're just kind of basing all their Easter eggs off of the Rocket, which is the best Easter egg, and I think most Easter eggs should be based off of that. But if I had to give it one little complaint, I do feel like all the Easter eggs did start feeling pretty samey, and I would like to see different varieties. Not most Easter eggs should be like this, but give us, at least one Black Ops 4 style Easter egg, which is super complicated. Like, that's fine. We can have one per game. Maybe make it DLC 4, or just make an Easter egg like Origins, where it's not really that difficult at the end of the day. It's just really a giant fetch quest and doing a lot of puzzles, and I really like stuff like that. So give us decent Easter egg like that. Or maybe even for a bonus map like Liberty Falls, maybe make an RNG style Easter egg similar to Moon. Like, I would have liked stuff like that, because all these Easter eggs feel pretty samey in this game, but they're all good. But I do like a little variety, so that's my only real complaint about that. But then there's the best thing gameplay wise about Black Ops 6, and that is the boss fights. Oh my gosh, these boss fights outside of the Sentinel artifact and Liberty Falls thing are peak boss fights. Patient 13, Guardian, Z-Rex, Samantha, Richtofen, all amazing boss fights, even though Richtofen is a bit cheese, but I don't even know. This is crazy. This is peak boss fights, and it is so freaking good, and I love it so much for this game. I just wish that most of them weren't just bullet sponges, but hey, we could take what we can. But then, of course, then we have high rounds, and high rounds in this game are interesting because they're all just super camp heavy, and that's because of two things. And the first thing is special enemy spam. Now, this was nerfed because it was absolutely insane at the launch of this game, but it's still not great. There's way too many special enemies in the high rounds, and I still don't like it. And because of those special enemies, it makes it really hard to train, so everyone's forced to camp. But it's not even just the special enemies. It's the fact that the zombies are super sticky in this game, super fast, and swing super fast in this game, and they're going to melt your armor super fast. And once you lose all that armor, you're going to be like a 3 to 2 hit down in those high rounds, and that just makes it practically impossible to do that. And that's a huge mistake, and it's not just a modern zombies thing. This is a Black Ops 6 problem, because in Cold War you could still train, but in this game you can't, and that's a big problem in my mind, and they cannot make that mistake again, because everyone was just camping all high rounds. And that includes the mutant injection spam, which you like or you don't. I wasn't a big fan of it because I actually gave my controller stick drift because I was meleeing so much with the R3 button. So it is what it is, but you know, there's just a big problem with camp. Even though this is coming from someone who actually prefers camping for high rounds, I still thought it was a bit ridiculous. And I think that's all the big things about the gameplay. And even though this gameplay has its problems and its issues, I still think overall it was a really, really fun year of Call of Duty Zombies, mainly because of those boss fights, mainly because of those Easter eggs, mainly because of those augments and all those new features. They outshine the problems of the modern zombie systems. They outshine the loadout problem. They outshine the point system. They outshine the damage killing, the armor, in my opinion. And you could disagree with that, but for me, I think that did do a better job at covering its problems than it didn't. Now I want to touch on the maps a bit, and this is just going to be the individual gameplay of them. And first off, we have Terminus, and Terminus is a pretty cool map with a really cool location, just an island with the middle of the ocean with a tsunami and the Cthulhu monster in the water. Like, all of that is pretty cool, and I do like its wonder weapon, even though it does have a bit of a learning curve. But my issues with this is that a lot of this map kind of ends up feeling empty for me. Like, I don't feel like a lot of it feels like a lot of stuff's going on, especially the islands outside the map. It doesn't feel like those are places you even bother going most games. Like, I don't think they should force you to go to them either, but like, I don't know, it just kind of feels empty to me in that case. And even though I love the boss fight, the Easter egg for me in this map is probably the weakest outside of the actual bad maps. But overall, I do think it's a pretty solid map. It's not as good as a lot of people used to make it sound, but it's still a solid map, and I do like playing it. But then we have the worst map in the game, and this was Liberty Falls. I hate it so much. I hate the fact that you don't have a set crew on this map, and I will never not hate it for that. On top of that, it's the least zombified map ever. Like, people were calling it a Warzone map. I wouldn't go as far as that, but like, it just doesn't feel like zombies when you play it compared to all the other maps in this game. Like, it's just crazy the level of like zombie feels compared to all the other maps. Like, it's just not great. But it has the jet gun return, which is whatever. The Easter egg, at least it has one as a bonus map, because most bonus maps don't have one. And the story of it is kind of interesting, I'll give it that, but really it's just not a good map. Then we have Citadel de Mort. At first, everyone was on board with this map, saying how amazing it is, and my opinion of it never changed. I love the swords, I love the Easter egg, I love the boss fight. I even like the backstory to this map. Even though this map and its storyline has its issues, like, it's still the depth of the story with the owl and his bastard sons and all the magic, and that he was a Templar and all that is so fascinating to me. I really wish that they would dig more into that in the storyline, but unfortunately they didn't. But overall, it was so freaking cool, and I love this map so much, and I think it is a top tier map of all time, definitely top 10. So shout out to Citadel, amazing map. And now we go to the Tomb. The Tomb, huh? A very small map. as a reused wonder weapon with the ice staff, with no real good story explanation for that. And it's not like they needed to explain it immediately, but at least give us hints for something, right? Because the staffs are supposed to be one of the most all-powerful things, the most iconic things about the OG story, yet we're just throwing it in there for fun, I guess. Like, no like story explanation stuff. Like, I guess supposedly this is, you know, origins in the Dark Ether or something. I don't know, but they never really even built on that either, so I don't know. And then on top of that, you have the Chaos tie-in, which just completely ruins the Chaos story, because why in the hell is Sentinel Artifact shooting beams? That's not how the Sentinel Artifact works. It's supposed to start a whole trial. I mean, I don't know. It's just a mess of the map. I don't even know what was going on here, honestly, so not a fan of that. But then they decided to just drop Peak out of nowhere with Shattered Veil. I mean, I'll always be a sucker for these maps that are just like a mansion in the middle of a forest. That's why I love Dead of the Nights location so much, even though people really hate that map. But I mean, I think it's really solid. I think it has come with the coolest Easter egg steps of all time, because one of the coolest things about an Easter egg, in my opinion, is when you do an Easter egg step and it changes the map. And how many times do we see this? Not only the paintings did we access a new room, but we had so many hidden rooms revealed to us throughout this Easter egg. I love that so much. And especially that Z-Rex boss fight, so freaking cool that we fought a zombie T-Rex. That is so cool. And my only issues with this is that the wonder weapons are pretty much just reused. They're like the Wonder Waff and then a bunch of Mark IIs, variants that are very similar to ones we saw inside of Alpha Omega, which is not exciting. And those are probably the only negative things to say about this map, to be completely honest with you guys. But everything else, amazing, and I like it a lot. But then we have the final map, Reckoning, and this is an interesting one because I think the general gameplay of it is fine. It's unique how the map is laid out. Everything is just fine. The location is fine. And that's all I could really say about it, because then we have the Gogorfex Wonder Weapon, which with its 2 upgrades is just okay in my opinion, and the Easter egg steps are fun. I'll give them that. I think it's one of the more fun Easter eggs to do in this map. But the best thing about this map is the fact that it has 2 boss fights and 2 endings, even though people don't like the endings, but you know, it still has 2 boss fights. And I really do like that with the 2 boss fights, even though the Samurai boss fight is super easy for the most part, and then the Richtofen boss fight is hard, but in probably the worst possible way, because it's just hard in the cheesy way, because he has a bunch of random insta-kill attacks, which is pretty annoying. But I still appreciate the challenge, because it took me more attempts to beat this boss fight than I have for any boss fight in a while, and I at least like that. Overall, just an okay-ish map, I would say. Now this brings me to something that a lot of people don't look at, but this is the ambience, the vibes, the feel, or the aura of maps, and the experience that it just made you feel. And I will say, a lot of these maps, I would say, are pretty weak in this department. Mainly Liberty Falls, that's probably the weakest one. And then you have one that is weak in a weird way, and that's the Tomb. Because on paper, this sounds really cool, because you're kind of going into these lost civilizations. At the top of it, you have this Roman civilization that was lost thousands of years ago. And as you go further down, you find older and older civilizations, ones that we don't even get explanations for. And then finally, you enter the Dark Ether, which supposedly the Dark Ether is where the original origins took place. And all of that is good on paper, but very little of it is explored or even used in any meaningful way. And it's a complete miss in my opinion, because the idea of that is so freaking cool. Like, let us explore that story of all of these ancient civilizations. But instead we just have this random Archibald guy just yapping to us the whole time, when it could have been used for the ancient civilizations that we are exploring. But unfortunately, it is what it is. And then there's Reckoning, probably the most mid one. Like, there's nothing bad about it, but it's just like a Janus Towers at the end of the day. That's all it really is. And I mean, the music for it is whatever, but yeah, it's fine. And then we have Terminus, which is an interesting map, because the soundtrack for this is so weak. It is probably one of the weakest ones, even worse than Liberty Falls and the Tomb, because it just doesn't have anything going on. And even if you listen to those soundtracks, you probably couldn't recognize them, because like, they're just not standoutish. They're like background music that you could just ignore, and that's a big problem with it. But I think they really were betting on that storm ambience, and that's fine. It works to an extent, but just not to the level I would want. And because of that, I just feel like it just doesn't capture that feeling of a prison. It doesn't capture that feeling of a hidden facility underneath that prison, and that's kind of my problem with it. And it's not like I'm saying it's bad, but it's just not there where you would want it to be. But then out of nowhere, with these 2 maps, Treyarch just made it insane. And this first off will be Shattered Veil. With Shattered Veil and its ambience, like, oh my gosh, when you first open that door to the T-Rex room, it is just a feeling that you don't really feel that much in modern zombies. It's so cool. You look at everything in the map, everything feels like there's something going on here. You want to question what's going on here. What is there blood writing on the wall? Why is that saying the things? Why is there drawings from a child here? Like, there's so much environmental storytelling that has been lacking so much in modern zombies, and they did such a good job with it in Shattered Veil. And even though it does have some really banger songs, like some of the best soundtrack songs in the game, in fact my favorite soundtrack songs in the game, unfortunately it doesn't have that many of them. And you may be tricked to believe that it does because you hear a song played pretty often, especially throughout the Easter egg. But the thing is that they just keep reusing the same song except different sections of it. And it's the same song that you hear when you first open the T-Rex room, and that's something that doesn't sit well with me because it's just the same song over and over. Don't get me wrong, it's a banger, but it's the same song. But then we have a map that really knows how to do ambience, vibe, and aura, even though nobody wants to give it credit. That is Citadel. The fact that we were able to return to a map that is based on a medieval castle is so cool. And sure, I understand the complaint that most of the map doesn't even take place in the medieval castle, but same thing with the Rising Rocket, to be completely honest. But regardless though, even with that, I think it's so cool because you think of the areas outside of even the castle. You have the medieval village, which I wish they would make a full map out of in medieval village. I think that'd be so freaking cool. But you go in there and you hear wailing and crying in the distance, like what's going on over there? It makes you question stuff like that. And even in the farm side of things, like, it's cool. The courtyard looks really cool. Everything looks so cool, and I love the vibes of it. I just wish there was more of all of them. And if you want to give it a complaint, maybe you can complain that they didn't do enough of any of them when they were trying to do all of them, and that's a fair complaint. But everything else about it is so well done. And if you want to hear a great soundtrack, listen to the Citadel de Mora soundtrack. Like, this is on the levels of maybe like Black Ops 2 maps, which Black Ops 2 is peak soundtrack, so maybe it's not on that level, but it's pretty close to it. Like, it's one of the best soundtracks we've had in a while. Everything you do would have a unique song based on which sword you were building, based on which Easter egg step you did. Everything would have a unique song, and they were all so good, and I love that so much. And I really don't understand the criticisms towards Citadel. Everything about this map is so freaking good, from its gameplay to its wonder weapons, its Easter egg, boss fight, and especially its vibes and its aura. And I like that so much. So overall, it's a great map and so many good things about it. But overall for Black Ops 6, in terms of ambience, vibes, and aura, unfortunately most maps just don't have that. They don't have these crazy locations. They don't have that soundtrack. They don't have those vibes. It doesn't have that environmental storytelling. It's really only Shattered Veil and Citadel. Those are the only two maps that really do it. And as much as I love those two maps, the rest of the maps really do drag it down.
Welcome to the party.
Man, well, then we have the story. And I know all of you guys know how this turned out, but let me bring your guys' minds back before the launch of even Black Ops 6. And there was a lot of reasons to be excited, even just the things that they left us off with Cold War. I mean, Samantha's now trapped in the Dark Ether, our characters were arrested, and Peck is now looking for something in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Like, there's some cool things to be left there. Not to mention Project Janus and whatever Richtofen was doing. Like, that is cool. And I mean, at first it seemed like it was going to get even better, because then we had the reveal that we're going to have a set crew back, which is the bare minimum, but is still very exciting because the story is 10 trillion times better with a set crew. And then on top of that, we get the intro cutscene to Liberty Falls, which, no matter if you hate the Dark Ether story or not, you could agree is one of the best cutscenes of all time. But unfortunately, that excitement wouldn't just stay there, because then we actually get the game. And we see some of the cracks already showing. We see at launch that Liberty Falls doesn't have a crew, which is terrible in my opinion. But even if you ignore that, we even notice some weird issues with the storytelling. Like in the ending cutscene to Terminus, we see that Strauss is strongly against the Sentinel artifact and magic and stuff like that. Which is weird because that's not what we were told about him in the intel for Cold War. Because in Cold War, we were told that he was a fan of this stuff. And in fact, his hero growing up was Gabriel Kraft, a demonologist. So whatever happened to all that? Did he have some sort of falling out with this whole idea of magic and all that? I mean, they never explained that, so all we could really assume is that this was a storytelling mistake, I guess. But speaking of that magic he didn't like, I mean, this is where they started to tie in the Chaos storyline of of Black Ops 4, a storyline that many people thought was left for dead, and it seemed like we were looking for the Sentinel artifact from that story. And in our next map, Citadel de Mor, we kind of saw a bit more of this. We see all of this magic stuff, we meet Kraft, and we learn the backstory of this map, and there's so much exciting things in Citadel de Mor. I mean, not only is it the Kraft stuff, but even the backstory, the owl, the one who used to be in charge of this castle, because we learned this owl was formerly a Templar, but got excommunicated because he was going around the world collecting artifacts that actually turned out to be the incantations we use in map. We also hear about his 4 bastard sons and the swords he made for them, and the guardian he created to protect the amulet. Like, stuff like that is super cool. And it didn't even stop there, because we also had a radio from Kraft talking about how he adopted Richtofen as a child and started talking about the house, making us think like the house could be important. But then where did this all go? I mean, Kraft just dies, never to be seen again, and then the owl story is completely forgotten. We never get that explained again. There's no deep story. There's nothing like the Great War that we saw when they had the medieval time tie-in in the old Ether story. It's nothing like that. It's just for this map. And that's the biggest problem with the Black Ops 6 story, is that everything was so self-contained. The Archibald story, the owl story, Modi's story, even the characters in the paintings on Shattered Veil, all of these characters and their stories are so self-contained and don't tie into anything else. And that's a humongous problem, because in the past everything used to tie together, and that's what made the OG story so interesting. Whereas this one, it was just constantly just so much self-contained story. And it got even worse, because not only did they forget the old storytelling methods that made it interesting and feel like a puzzle before, but then they just started making mistakes with their own story they were telling here. The obvious ones was the mistakes with the Chaos story. Like, you had the Sentinel artifact for some reason just spinning around shooting a beam at us now. Like, that's not what that is. That's supposed to start a trial and find if you're worthy of getting one of the sections of knowledge of how to make an infinite amount of prima materia. That's what that does. It doesn't do whatever we use it for in this story. It's not used to make yourself a body just with one Sentinel artifact. It's not made to bring your family back to life. That's not what it does, but for some reason it just does now. I mean, I don't know, that's weird on its own. But then you can say, well, the Chaos storyline ain't even really this story, they're just kind of using that, whatever, like, fine, whatever. But then forgetting your own story and completely ignoring the depth and importance of them, like, how do you explain how the Forsaken, one of the most all-powerful beings in the history of Call of Duty Zombies, just turns into an absolute joke in this map? He finally escapes his containment changer, and then it's just an absolute joke. He's just a little bit more powerful of a Uber Klaus. Like, what is up with that? And then on top of that, we turn him into the Gorgorfex wonder weapon, and it's not even that powerful of a wonder weapon. Like, what is happening here? I really don't understand all of that. And not to mention, one of the more egregious things about this story is that Samantha Maxis, who we were told for literally years was just trapped in the Dark Ether, all of a sudden just turns out to be dead out of nowhere after all. Like, what? You just kill off one of the most important characters by lying to us this whole time that she wasn't dead? It's just mind-boggling. And it's just so bad, and I just don't understand what they were doing with the story. And it gets even worse, potentially. Now, this one is up in the air because we don't know where the story is going with Black Ops 7. But from what it seems like with the ending to Reckoning, what it seems like they're doing is that we're going to go into the Dark Ether and just tell a new story in there. Forgetting all of the backstory, everything they built up, the Owl, Archibald, and all the ancient story, and even the Chaos Titan and all that, that's just going to be forgotten. And we're now just in the Dark Ether, telling a story that's probably going to tie into the old Ether timeline. Which I'm not against that idea. I still think that sounds cool, and we could have fun with that story. But I can't believe how we could just completely forget everything there. Because even though with all the mistakes of the Dark Ether story, there's a lot they built up there. It's just they never used it. They never used the Owl. They never used any of the characters they introduced in Cold War again. They just forget about them constantly. And they still have opportunities to right those wrongs, because even with the old Ether story, when there would be characters they would think were just one-offs or whatever, they would then tie in years later, and there was still a chance for them to do that. But if we're just abandoning that all for the Dark Ether, you're just giving up on that story. This is practically just a new story. And if that's what they want to do, that's what they want to do. But unfortunately, it just feels a bit unfortunate that we forget so much of that story that they did build up, even though they didn't use it. And unfortunately with all of this, I can't help but say, but the story was the worst thing about Black Ops 6 Zombies. It is incredibly disappointing. So many things that we thought were going to set up, so many things they thought they were going to go with, and they just didn't use at all. Just to potentially throw it all away with the ending, just starting practically a new story all over again. And this brings me to the final part, and this is my rating of Black Ops 6 Zombies. And listening throughout this review, you might have already got an idea of what I think about the game. I mean, I've talked about how I've had issues with a lot of the modern systems in this game, whether that be the points, loadout, or damage scaling, armor, all those things I have issues with. Or maybe even some of the maps being just bad in my opinion, with Liberty Falls and the Tomb, or maybe how ambience is pretty bad on all but 2 of the maps, or how the story is probably one of the weakest stories in the history of Call of Duty Zombies. All of those things are negative. But even with all of that, the vibes and ambience of Citadel and Shattered Vale are so good, and the maps themselves are so freaking good in my opinion. Shattered Vale, Citadel, Terminus are all really fun maps, and even Reckoning's a fun Easter egg map. Like, that's cool, I like that. And then even with all of the modern zombies mechanics that I do not like, at the same time, it has so many good features. Things I've mentioned like the augments, direct demo, save quit, and even the Easter eggs and their boss fights are absolute peak Call of Duty Zombies. And at the end of the day, the most important part of a video game is its gameplay. And I think Black Ops 6 did one of the best jobs at that in the history of Call of Duty Zombies. And because of all that, I still like Black Ops 6 Zombies, even through its issues. Every game is going to have them, but at the end of the day, I think this game had more good things about it than bad things about it. So for my final ranking of Black Ops 6 Zombies, I would rank it a 7 out of 10.